The World War I was one of the biggest wars in history, and it changed the world socially, economically, technologically, and politically, causing every major event for the remainder of the century, including World War II, the collapse of four empires, the formation of modern countries, boundaries being redrawn, and the formation of the United Nations. The beginning of the Worldwide War, taking over 40 million lives, started with a dispute between two countries when the Austrian-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by a group of Serbian terrorists called the Black Hand. The Austrian-Hungarians set an ultimatum to the Serbians to prevent the two rival countries from going into war. However, one of these requirements in the ultimatum was to allow military troops on the Serbian land to search for the terrorist group. This offended the Serbians because they didn't allow outside military forces in their own home, much less one of their rivals. When Austria-Hungary heard that the Serbians were not going to agree to the terms of their ultimatum, they declared war on the Serbians, leading to all the allies on both countries being dragged into the war against their will. On one side, the Americans, British, French, Slovakians, and the Russians formed the Allies, and the Germans, Austrian-Hungarians, and the Ottoman Empire formed the Central Powers. The general on both sides predicted that the war would only last around 6 months, where sides would get tired of fighting and come to a quick resolution. But the war went on, lasting over 4 bloody years, and shaped the rest of the 20th century.
The war did not only take all of the resources of each country, but it also caused men to leave the workforce on the home front practically non-existent. The average age for kids to start working became younger, and for the first time, the average woman began to hold her own job. The need for women in the workforce became so important that they began to hold corporate positions in business. This led to women realizing that they were as smart as, and if not smarter than men, which led to the women's right movement, giving them the right to vote. After the war, the roles of women in politics, trade, and business became much greater. The voices and opinions of all women were much more often listened to and respected. Meanwhile, men were constantly being drafted into the army, leaving their families to go fight for the countries and often dying on the battlefield. World War I killed more than 9 million soldiers, sailors, and pilots, and over 5 million civilians, causing the populations in countries that participated in the war to plummet. These mass casualties in the war led to people developing negative views towards the government, because they felt like they were fighting a war only because the leaders of their countries were too prideful to admit defeat, and they were the ones paying the price. This led to many of the countries who were ruled by monarchs to be overthrown and replaced by democracy. Also, these negative views towards the government can still often be seen today in conspiracy videos and protests.
The economical, technological, and medical advances that came about during World War I caused a very large demand for weapons and for the creation of new war technologies. The implication of machine guns, poison gas, tanks, the Air Force, napkins, artillery, semi-automatic weapons, and bullets led to an increased demand of resources around the world. This demand caused a large boost in the economy. The amount of trade happening throughout the world hit a new high because most wearing coup tribes ran out of their own resources and bought more and more resources off the neutral countries. By the end of the war, none of the countries who actually fought in the war yielded any profit from it because they had spent so much on the war and received no pay from the spoils of war. The only countries who made a profit from the war was the countries who remained neutral and traded what resources they had with the countries at war. Because of the financial troubles of Europe, the United States became the world's leading economy because they arrived late in the war after most of Europe used most of their resources already. Meanwhile, Europe and Germany had to struggle to recover from their crippling debt. Before World War I, doctors never really understood the psychological effects of war. They didn't understand what caused the mental disabilities or in what way it caused them. But once World War I came, doctors learned that the disabilities were caused by psychological stressors, not physical stressors. This led to the development of treatments for mental disabilities caused by war.
World War I caused the downfall of four monarchies: Russia, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Turkey. It also led to the triumph of fascism in Italy and civil revolts in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. After the war, Germany faced a new all-time low. They became bitter towards the victors of World War I, and they wanted to earn back the honor they had lost in the war. This led to the rise of Adolf Hitler in World War II. World War I also caused the middle class to rise and the higher class to fall. This led to the gap between the upper and middle class to decrease, and it became harder to tell the difference between the two. Lastly, after the Treaty of Versailles was made, the borders of many European countries were reshaped, and new countries were created, such as Prussia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. Countries were also split apart or combined, such as Austria-Hungary becoming two individual countries, and Serbia, Montenegro, and part of Austria-Hungary becoming Yugoslavia.